What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Moguls. My name is Findlay-Shirras, and on today's show, we have a serial entrepreneur. He started his first company when he was 11 years old. Now he's had over 10 years in online marketing and tech startup land. He is an expert and enthusiast in the sharing economy, huge trend, and he is now the founder and CEO of Hostaway, a platform to help Airbnb hosts and on the greater scheme of things, all short-term rental investors and property managers improve their business, manage their business using marketing and sales automation. He specializes in business development, product, and growth hacking. So I'm really excited and hope you are to get to know and meet and learn from Marcus Rader. Hey Marcus, thanks for being on the show. Why don't you kind of let everyone know a brief, short story about who you are and why you started Hostaway.
All right. Yeah, thanks for bringing me on. It's exciting to be here. About 4 years ago, my wife and I, we were living in Finland and decided to move to the new world. But we didn't want to go to the US. We traveled a lot there. And we got an opportunity to move to Canada. And we thought, that's really great, but we'd never even seen the country. And all we had to go on was asking people who've been. Most people have never been to Canada. But those that had been said, yeah, it's nice, so go there. And that's why we ended up moving to Canada. Now, when we got here, my wife had a job and I didn't. And well, when you move in Europe, it's very easy to fit in because you're all Europeans. Like if you move from Belgium to Netherlands, yeah, you may have a harder time finding friends, but languages and culture are fairly similar and you can always find a job because you have the same big companies everywhere. When you move from Europe to North America, it's not a given that you'll be able to actually continue in the same line of work. And what I found when I came here is I saw a massive trend in a topic that interests me, real estate. I saw that people were renting out properties on Airbnb, which wasn't anything new, but what really surprised me was the professional scale of it. Because at that time, Airbnb was marketing itself as someone where a platform where single mother who has a spare bedroom can make extra money to buy food for her kids, and I think that's a business model that everyone appreciated. But when I came here, I noticed that's not really how they make money. No, these are professional property managers, people who quit their day jobs and they just manage properties, and not even their own. They manage properties that someone else owns and rent them out on the short-term market. Yeah. So one thought that I had is, okay, I don't really want to compete here. I don't know anyone. I don't know anything about the market, but I could set this up in Europe and I could run it myself. That would be a pretty profitable business. And I started thinking about the logistics, and I found out that, yeah, time zone differences is gonna be hard. You have guests coming early in the morning or late at night. You have cleaners calling in sick. How am I gonna do that when I'm asleep? Because you can't, well, you can run a business without sleeping, but only maybe for 1 year or maximum 2. At some point you need to sleep. So I thought, well, there's gotta be a mobile app for that. There's gotta be one.
Gotta be one.
No, there wasn't. And well, spoiler alert, there still isn't one today, but we're getting very close. We're getting very close.
Okay.
So I thought with my experience and background in working in various tech startups that have all had their good times and their bad times. They had their pivots, they had their founder key employees, they raised a lot of money and sometimes run out of money and sometimes lost key employees. I thought I can do this, but I didn't just set out with an idea and started building stuff. No, I did some thorough research first. So I started looking around for these professional property managers here in Toronto, and I interviewed them because I wanted to know, what do they work with, what is their daily lives like, what are their problems, and is there maybe a solution available that makes them stand out. And they were telling me that one of the biggest issues they have that prevents them from growing their business is running the operations. Because if you have a property only on Airbnb, you're not going to generate enough revenues to actually run your business and keep your investors happy. You need to have that property on a lot of other platforms like Expedia, HomeAway, VRBO, Canada Stays, Booking.com, and all of them bring different clientele, but you need to be on all the platforms, which is a logistical nightmare, because even if you have only 20 properties, that means on a Friday, you're probably going to have 10 people checking in. And your job is to make sure that all of them have paid, that all of them know where they're going. You need to make sure all 10 properties are cleaned, and you need to make sure that they're all set up well, that there's no water damage or suddenly the electricity is gone. And you can only go to sleep when you know that all 10 guests are there. And that would be fairly easy if you only used Airbnb. But once again, there's no single dominant player in this industry.
How many platforms are there?
Since we started, it's consolidated a lot. So, for example, Expedia bought HomeAway 2 years ago for $3.9 billion US dollars. And also there was one called Luxury Retreats in Canada.
Yeah.
That got purchased by Airbnb. So right now, there's really only 3 big players in this space.
Do you see more of that consolidation happening?
Yes, but I think Airbnb is going to be strong enough not to get bought out. I would be very surprised if Expedia manages to buy them.
Are there any of these guys? I heard these international players
All
coming
of them,
over.
yes.
The Sonder and the one from India and
those are property managers. Yeah. So
yeah.
Sonder is a great example of a property manager. Unfortunately, I never got to interview them 4 years ago because they were in Montreal and I was in Toronto.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, there's not really any property managers that are global yet.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I did the research, and what the property managers told us was that yeah, we really need a platform that just unifies everything. I want to know these 10 guests that come from different channels. I don't know who they are, how much are they paying, have they paid. I want to know if the property is clean. I want to know what is the key code to the door so I can send it to my guests. Actually, I want that sent automatically.
Yeah.
And this was still at the research stage. I didn't even have a product in mind or a solution. I was trying to find out the problem. But I started by looking at the solutions available, and I immediately found about 20 softwares that did exactly that. So I went back to these property managers and asked, why aren't you using this one? Or why aren't you using that one or that one? And they all had different reasons not to use them. A lot of them at the time weren't integrated with Airbnb. Well, if your main business comes from Airbnb, your software's got to be compatible with that.
Yeah.
Some had more of a hybrid business model where they took over part of the work from the property manager, which then again lowered their margins, so they couldn't afford to operate with those softwares.
Okay.
And
you gave this. Yeah. I remember last time we chatted. You gave this really good analogy of you know what happened in the airline space, and how what the problems they had are the same things that the short-term property management is having.
Yeah, that's very true, and that's something that we're waiting for. So, in the airline space in the 70s, in order to get a ticket, you had to call the airline, and you didn't have any. The travel agencies, they didn't have the data available. If you wanted to buy a ticket from there, they had to call every airline, and they had to know the routes. But then, if you booked a ticket with an airline, it wasn't confirmed anywhere centrally. It was only stored within that airline, which meant you couldn't have any code shares or connecting flights. And what eventually happened when technology entered the game, and I'm sad to say, when you go to an airport, you see their computers, it's still 80s technology to a large extent, was that one player managed to dominate the market. That was Amadeus. So that 5-digit booking code that's attached to every single airline ticket you buy anywhere in the world, that's the Amadeus code. It's a centralized system.
And that's what you want to build for short-term rentals?
Yes. I think where the entire market is still a few years away.
How many property managers are there? Like professional property managers, because talk about your ideal client, and then how many of them are there?
Yeah, so first of all, the concept of a professional property manager, the way we define that is someone who either has quit their day job and decided to do this full time, or at a bare minimum kept their day job but hired a full-time person to manage the business. So let's say someone who rents out their summer cottage on the weekends, that wouldn't count as a property manager. That's just someone who's renting out the summer cottage, and they probably wouldn't need our software either because they can coordinate that pretty well.
Yeah.
In terms of the number of property managers, I think it will increase massively in the coming years.
Yep.
A recent trend that we're seeing is that VCs are investing into property management companies. And that's something that didn't exist when we started. We thought it was just people setting up businesses. But yeah, Sonder is a great example. I think they raised, was it 30 or 40 million in their last round?
Yeah.
They don't have any groundbreaking IP or technology there. No, they just have a solid business that scales.
And execution, operations, all that stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
What about how many short-term, like what's the market size for short-term rentals and how is that changing? Do you know that data?
I think globally right now we're talking, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's between 10 and 20 million properties that are available on the short-term rentals.
On all those different platforms?
On all those platforms, yeah.
Cool.
And the number of property managers, this is really hard. You can read, it's hard to find the reports, and once you find them, all give different numbers, but the number that we often use is between 100,000 and 150,000 globally.
Yeah.
But that's a fairly small number. It's a fairly niche market, but it's worth noting that out of those, 40,000 are in the US. So if you go into a market like China, it hasn't even started yet.
And it probably will.
Yeah, and they'll probably have way more than 40,000 professional property managers in 10 years.
Explain, like, so I'm a professional property manager, and right now I have horrible systems to manage all my stuff. How does the technology work if I go with you?
Okay, so if you don't have a system in place, probably you have a spreadsheet. You need to know certain basic things. When you get to work in the morning, you need to know what are you supposed to do today. And you need to know, are there any guests leaving? Are there any guests arriving? If guests are leaving, you need to schedule a cleaner. If guests are arriving, you need to make sure that they know the address. You need to make sure they know how to get there. And they probably will need some help. They will need to know how to get there from the airport, for example. So at a bare minimum, you need a list of who's coming and who's going. And that you can do by a spreadsheet. But all of these platforms, they have tools within them to allow the guests to cancel or modify their reservation. So let's say if someone books on booking.com, they can cancel it at any time. And if their plane is late, they might just cancel it and book it again one day later. So if you're planning on them to arrive today, your spreadsheet will be out of date. And you can't call them because they're on flight. Now, how our platform helps with this is that you're able to get all that booking data into one place, and you're able to do things like send an automatic message to the guest. So if you want to give them the address and the PIN code, that goes out automatically on the day of arrival. You're also able to send a message to your cleaners automatically so that they know, hey, the checkout is now, and please go and clean the place. And they can, of course, check their cleaning schedules. You
got your own 5-digit code like the Aerodyne or whatever, like the airlines?
No, we're not there yet. But what it also does is it helps you market and sell these properties. So a key factor in hotels and, well, actually airlines as well, is the pricing. Because there's a certain amount of supply, and the pricing is really the tool you have to determine how much revenues you get. If you sell too low, you're going to end up missing out on revenues. If you sell too high, you might book a couple of nights, but your low occupancy will bring down the overall revenues. So, and adjusting those rates, if you're available on 5 platforms and you suddenly want to lower the rate for the next weekend because you don't have enough bookings, that would take a lot of time, but in our platform you can do one click. Have
you started to see like what is the average ROI of a short-term rental, and if they start to use technology like yours, what kind of uplift can they have? Are you starting to see that at all?
I would say when it comes to the return on investment, that's maybe not the most used metric for the property manager, because that would be a metric that the investor has, and the investor would give the property to be managed by a property manager.
Yeah.
The property manager, on the other hand, they would be more interested in their gross margin. So out of the money that they get, how much direct expenses do they have?
Yeah.
So for example, if they need to pay the cleaner $100 to clean a place, and they rent it out for $1,000, and they get $200 in commission on that, that means that they have to give up half of their commission to their cleaner.
Right.
And the way our software can help with that is, yes, you'll be able to adjust rates and connect to dynamic pricing algorithms and optimize the occupancy. But more importantly, it allows you to add on more properties and analyze how profitable each one is.
Right, so just manage more.
Yes.
In the same amount of time.
Yes.
And increase your total profit at the end.
So
Okay.
a lot of, well, this isn't as common anymore, but 4 years ago I was asking property managers, what's the most important job you have? And most of them were building solid businesses, but some of them thought it's to have happy guests, or it's to keep my investors happy. But that's unfortunately not the case.
Yeah.
As well, I think airlines are a good example. They've been a lot in media over the last year. They don't have happy users at all, but they still make money.
Yep.
Even if it's competitive, they still make money.
Yep.
Now, for a property manager, the number one way to grow the business is to make sure that you have a steady sales funnel, that you're constantly getting on more properties. Because each one of those properties that you have, eventually you're going to lose it. Let's say, even if it's an old person who has a couple of holiday homes, they give them to you. Maybe that person dies one day and gives the holiday homes to the children and they want to sell it.
Yep.
You're going to eventually lose all the properties that you have unless you own them yourself. And that means that you need to be constantly spending your time on finding new properties.
So give us some insight into the scope and the size of your business now. So how many customers do you serve? What geographic areas are you covering?
Yeah, so we got around 10,000 properties globally at the moment, and we have since yesterday we have 31 employees. We're gonna grow to 50 this year.
Good for you.
Now, something that I found, so one of the things when you start a tech company, the advice you always get is focus on one thing and do it really well. And in this industry, it's not possible to do that if you want a good technology. Because in order to get these partnerships with Airbnb, Expedia, HomeAway, you need to be a big global player. But if you're a big global player, you can only be that if you're actually global.
Right.
So you can't create a software just for Canada. I was actually talking to Canada Stays, and they asked if we can provide our platform in French. And I said, well, yeah, we'd love to, but that's very niche.
Yeah. Have you done translation yet of your platform yet?
No, it's certainly on the roadmap.
Have you thought about how much it, because I'm thinking about doing that too, have you thought about how much it costs? And startup founders, if you want to expand internationally, which in real estate, usually that involves international expansion, have you looked into what it's going to cost time and money to do translation yet?
Translation is very cheap. That's not a problem at all.
No?
No.
Okay.
And we've even
and like good translation, not like Google Translate, but like actually having the code translated and stuff like that?
The translation is really not an issue at all. That's a one-time cost for most of the stuff.
Yeah.
But the cost associated with it is if you get clients who only speak Portuguese, then you need salespeople who speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
And if they manage to sell to these clients, then you need support. And you can't have the entry-level support, you also need a second-level support who speaks Portuguese.
Yeah.
That's where the costs lie. So every language will cost gradually more.
Yeah.
The other cost there is time. When we need to send out a newsletter, or when we need to update our instructions, or even change a text in the dashboard or the mobile app, that will have to take a lot longer. Because now if nobody knows what text we should write, they can basically ask me, and I'll just give them a text, and then it'll be fine.
So when you think about the major European cities that are good for English-speaking tech companies, predominantly, so they're like, I want to expand internationally, but I don't want to go down this translation path because the whole picture of it is a process and a project. What are some of your favorite? What would you advise startups as some of the best major European cities to go to?
One of the main differences between North America when it comes to tech startups and Europe is I find the European ones often think global first, whereas the North American ones usually think local first. And Airbnb and Uber are perfect examples where when they opened their platforms, they started on one city and then they expanded to another city. They weren't even thinking about the international expansion, whereas many European startups, when they launch the platform, is global from the start, including ours.
Yeah.
Great tech startup hubs in Europe are found in the Scandinavian countries, Stockholm, Helsinki, Copenhagen. We got Berlin in Germany. Amsterdam is a big one, London, Barcelona, and Paris.
Why do you think those Scandinavian countries? Because I mean, Berlin makes sense, Amsterdam makes sense, London makes sense. I know Dublin's got the cool tax thing for people, right? But Scandinavian countries, because that interests me. Is there any particular reason why those cities?
Yeah, there is. There's a very particular reason, but I'm not sure if I can really go into it because it's related to politics.
Oh, okay.
It's basically they have the highest education level on the planet, and they have free education for everyone, free healthcare, social insurance. You know, nobody needs to be afraid of not having a job. Everyone can afford to raise kids, which creates an environment where you have access to highly educated people who are very skilled.
Yeah.
Also, the standard of living is quite high, and prices are expensive, which means that people can travel. So they can go to London or New York or Silicon Valley, get experience, and then come back and start their own companies because they can afford that. If you live in a country with very low cost of living, let's say if you're a student from Calgary, it's going to be quite expensive to just go to Silicon Valley because already paying the rent is going to be quite hard. But it's a lot easier if you come from a place where the rent is already double that of Silicon Valley.
No, that's very good insight.
Same thing with Switzerland. They also have very high education.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the future of Hostaway. Are you guys raising money again in the future? Do you have new technologies you're coming out with in the future? Talk about the future of the company.
So what we're going to focus on this year is expanding our service offering, mostly through partners. So we're going to make sure we get closer relationships with the big travel agencies, but also do a lot of integrations. For example, we've done integrations now with 2 dynamic pricing providers. One is called Price Labs, and the other one is called Beyond Pricing. What they do is they scrape data from the internet, from sites like Airbnb and Hotels.com and HomeAway, and they find out whether some days are popular or not. And then they produce a price estimate for the property manager. So we integrated that into our platform so they don't have to set their own prices anymore. Smart locks is another one that we're working on this year. It's so much easier if you have smart locks on all your properties, and instead of telling guests where the keys are, you just give them a code.
Yep.
And that also makes sure that they can't come back the day after checkout and rob the place. Because
so are you going to do a partnership with a smart lock company, or are you going to have your own?
No, we're going to do partnerships.
Partnership?
Yeah.
Very cool.
There's a lot of things we could do on our own, but we need to focus. If we want to be decentralized, we can't be the best at everything. So we could build our own pricing algorithm, but it won't be better than a company that focuses only on that. We could build our own smart lock, but probably a company that focuses on building smart locks will build a better one.
I know when it would come in real estate, whether it be residential, commercial, property management, all these tech companies, and even the brokerages who want to become more tech-centric, a big trend is for them to have an open platform that makes it very easy to have these partnerships and integrations. As a product guy, like, giving advice to tech companies and to the brokers who want to build a platform that allows for these easy integrations so that they don't have to build, like even residential real estate, they don't want to build an automated valuation tool for how much a home is worth. They want to use someone else's. They don't want to build a CMA product. They want to use someone else's. So you're doing the same thing, and maybe you have some insight into some best practices to do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's called the ecosystem. And actually, I worked at a startup where they were trying to enter the market of their core business, but then the strategy changed, and instead of doing their core business, they wanted to build an ecosystem, which is a great strategy. I mean, Apple did it. They used to be a player in mobile phones. They used to have a good mobile phone. But what they really succeeded in doing was building a marketplace and an ecosystem where basically either you're in it or you're out. If you produce mobile games today, you don't have an option to not be in the App Store, because people who pay for mobile games, they have an iPhone. Yeah. And you see that in the revenues that come from Android. But Apple built that ecosystem, and Amadeus for airlines, they built that ecosystem. Now to get there, you need to be a massive player. You can't just be a small company trying to enter a market and then think that you're going to build an ecosystem and everyone else is going to plug into it. Yeah. No, first you become the market leader. Then we'll see where.
And you can build the ecosystem? Yeah. Okay. When you think about like the challenges, so we got lots of listeners who could become customers, clients, partners, investors. And so when you think right now, here are some of the challenges I have as a company that maybe someone listening can help with. Here are some of the needs that I have as a founder that maybe, again, the listeners can help with. What comes to mind?
What I'm going to be focused on personally this year for the company is finding out and do a bit of more market research. Okay. I would like to see if there are developers out there. I'd like to see if there's real estate agents who are specialized in this field, and just network and see what they're working on. Larger property management companies, of course. I'd like to talk to you, but probably our sales team is already hunting you down.
I hope so.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit strange because the market was so young just a couple of years ago, and I feel like it's still so young. It's still at the point of emerging. Yeah, it's gonna grow massively, and we're gonna see big changes in the industry as well. I think this year, maybe early next year, Airbnb will take on hotels. They might do an IPO or get acquired. At the same time, I think there's going to be a lot more things happening in the property management space. I think already 2 years ago, Airbnb was talking to real estate investment trusts in the US, for example, Avalon Bay, and we're trying to see how they can allow the people who rent the properties to utilize Airbnb. Yeah. I think that's a direction that's coming because now the property managers have access to proper funding. There's a property manager in the US called Evolve. They raised 120 million. And you can do a lot with 120 million.
I could do a lot with 120.
Yeah, you can build a lot of properties. You know, if you got a prime real estate area where there's no more properties available, but tourists want to go there, if you have 120 million, you can actually buy some land and build something. Or even better, you can convince someone else to do it and just give them a profit share. Yeah. That way you can maybe afford to build 100 of those
resourcefulness.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that will just accelerate. I think in a few years we'll see a vacation rental real estate investment trust, something you can buy on the stock market, publicly traded.
Interesting.
I would invest.
What else? When you think about the future of property tech, I mean, we're so excited to be in it because I think it's going to be one of the largest industries in the world because, again, real estate is such a huge asset class and it's a wealth creation tool for the most wealthy people in the world. And it's like the world needs more people to become wealthy. And so there's all these cool technologies, fractionalized ownership, blockchain to help crowdfunding of real estate, to help people get into it. So you don't have to be an accredited investor to get into a REIT. You can actually start with $5,000, $10,000.
Yeah.
I see that already happening, which I love it. So when you think about the future of property tech and like what's exciting, and this vision that maybe you have that you hope will happen, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind is that you're right. It's one of the biggest asset classes on the planet, and I think as an industry, it's undervalued tremendously. One part of it is that it's not sexy, because when you think about property, it's, let's say, a condo, and then you think about technology. Oh, you have a key fob to get into it.
Yeah,
that's not really exciting compared to, let's say, Uber. Oh, yeah. You can make extra money just by driving home from work, or oh, you can order a cab on your phone and just get from A to B at half the price of a taxi, or Airbnb. Wow, you can travel exotic locations and meet the locals. Yeah. Or yeah, most industries are sexy, and I think this one is sexy more in terms of money than it's
very sexy. It's the sexiest when it comes to money.
Now what's completely missing from this industry is any kind of standards when it comes to technology. There's very few companies that are globally big. Actually, a Finnish company is quite big in this space.
Which one?
They produce elevators, Kone.
Okay.
And I know they don't have a good reputation here, but they have fairly good in outside of North America.
Yeah.
And they managed to turn their business models from selling hardware into a service-based business. And I think that's the right path, because that means that they maybe one day you can get an elevator for free and you just pay for the service, and technology will allow that because they can lower the cost with that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Now you talked about you want to do some market research. So let's finish off with this. If you could ask one question to the audience that they can put in the comments of the YouTube, what their answer would be. So if you want to ask people a question right now to get some insight, what would that question be? Who would you direct that question to? What do you really want to know from agents or developers or property managers that maybe you could ask the audience and get them to put an answer in the comment section?
Okay, I have a very simple question. Actually, no, it's not simple, but I know there's one person listening right now who has been waiting for someone to ask this question.
Okay.
Who will help me put together an investment fund of $1 billion that we invest in vacation rental properties and put it on the stock exchange? If you're out there, let me know.
Love it. Answer that question. I want to see that one too.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, thanks so much for being on the show. I love your story, and you're super sharp when it comes to how startups and the space. So if you guys haven't already, subscribed to the show so you can get to know more cool technologies, cool startups, and other people in the real estate space so that you can be great in real estate. Subscribe to the YouTube show and the podcast, and we'll see you next time.